Well, we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. Hey, there's my guy. Hey, Ryan.
How you doing?
So I want to welcome three entrepreneurs. I want to welcome Joel Schwartz, who is the head of product for a really awesome company called Sproutel. And Sproutel is a company that was accelerated in the Beta Spring Accelerator in Providence, Rhode Island. Many of my design thinking students know Joel's counterpart, Hannah Chung, who is a woman that I hold in the highest esteem. They have created a product called Jerry the Bear, specifically for young children with type 1 diabetes. It's a personal robot in the form of a cuddly teddy bear. And tonight Joel is going to talk about taking that platform to the next level, something that Hannah had previewed for us in our design thinking class last summer, which is they're now going to start to bring this into helping children with food allergies. So welcome, Joel Schwartz. Good to have you. In the back of the room, looking like The Rock, in the gentleman with the beard and the Marine crew cut, is Ryan Wright. Ryan is the co-founder and president of a company called Wright Grid, and Ryan is in the process of creating a portable cell phone charging platform that can be used solar powered, of course, because what other way would you power anything but using the sun, right, Ryan? And so Ryan, I've got the privilege of having Ryan in my Startup Next cohort, which we started last night. Ryan is a local graduate of both Northeastern and Babson. He's been through the Idea Accelerator. He's been through the Babson Accelerator. This guy is very, very committed to creating a completely new approach so that we never have to worry about running out of battery ever again. Okay? So welcome, Ryan. And then Gaut, before you disappear. Okay, great. So Gaut is a young woman that I just had a chance to know. I got to know her co-founder, Nadav. Nadav unfortunately had to fly back home to Israel at the very last minute because of his father's health issues. And so Gaut is very kindly coming and taking his place in the 11th hour. But Gaut is right now being accelerated at the Learn Launch Accelerator here in Boston. It's an EdTech accelerator. And this is a company that is bringing unique interactivity to toys for children in the 14-year-old plus or minus age range. But everything that they create is 3D printed. Everything that they do will interact with a smartphone app. And they actually were beginning to use 3D printing primarily just as a rapid prototyping tool, but so much fell in love with the technology that they decided they would actually use it to print their toys as well. Okay? So you're going to hear from all three of these awesome young entrepreneurs, all working on some very cool stuff. I want to let you know that thanks to my good friend and current student, Julian, we are taking advantage of the app that was the rage of South by Southwest this year. It's called Periscope. So we are being live streamed. So would you show this major, insane group of students here tonight? Can you let the world see who's here, all these good-looking faces? Okay, cool. All right. So the way we're going to structure this is I'm going to spend about 30 minutes providing an overview of human-centered design, why it is such an important part of the entrepreneurial journey, and then very quickly transition into a very important component of that, which is called rapid prototyping. And it's no surprise that if we're going to talk about rapid prototyping, we're going to do it here in this MakerBot guide store. So how many of you have had the privilege of doing something on a 3D printer at some point? You've been able to print a file to a 3D printer and see your ideas come alive. Anybody have that opportunity yet? Cool. All right. Well, maybe more of you will have that opportunity tonight. Okay? So we're going to talk about something that goes by various names: design thinking, human-centric design. And I love this quote by Brian Reed, and we all struggle with this every day. All things are designed. Very few things are actually designed well. Okay? And that is no longer acceptable. If you're an entrepreneur trying to break through in a very challenging, very competitive market, you need to begin not to think like a designer, you need to become a designer. Or you better have somebody on your team that is a world-class designer. So at Startup Next, make no mistake, we have 3 design experts on our staff. So I wanted to make those design experts available to our 7 startup teams, because there's no way that you can be successful if you're not thinking about design constantly. It's a critical part of the way that you interact with your customer in the marketplace, okay? So for my Holt students, many of you know that I teach 3 electives, and the 3 electives that I teach are focused around these 3 concentric circles. First one is design thinking, human-centered design. This is all about, is the product or solution that you are building something that your customers actually want, right? Now, on MIT's campus, we have a lot of brilliant PhDs that are, any one of them is smarter, they have a higher IQ. If we took all of our IQs and combined them in this room, any one of them would have a higher IQ than us, but there's one thing they always miss. They don't care about this. Okay? They're not in the business of having empathy. They're not in the business typically of having humility. They're in the business of coming up with great ideas and assuming their ideas are so brilliant that of course you will accept them. But that's not the way the world works. Okay? And so increasingly it's about, does someone find value in this? Paul Graham, the legendary head of Y Combinator, keeps it very simple. Build something people want. It's a very simple concept, but very few entrepreneurs actually do it. Okay? The second key part of this Venn diagram is, can you create a viable, sustainable, long-term business? And I teach a course called Disruptive Business Model Innovation. Now, what's important to understand is, for those of us building traditional for-profit enterprises, viable means, ongoing profit. But increasingly, and one could argue that on some level, Sproutel is a social venture, right? There's now this whole notion of a B corporation or a benefits corporation. And what that basically says is, yes, we need to make a profit to sustain ourselves, but we also want to deliver positive social impact. And if we're being extremely focused, we want to deliver the least negative environmental impact possible. So when we start to think about viability, a lot of that depends on, is this a traditional for-profit venture? Is it a social venture? Is it an environmental venture, something like Ryan is working on, right? And then finally, is the technology feasible? It's impossible to come up with almost any product today that is not technology enabled, okay? We are living in a digital world. Even our toys today are digital, okay? So tonight, of course, we're going to focus primarily on the gold circle, the human desirability circle, but there's no question that in the context of lean startup, the whole notion of fail fast, minimum viable product, it's very, very congruent to think about rapid prototyping here too, okay? So what the hell is design thinking, right? What really is it? Because there's a lot of noise around it, okay? Well, let's start off with a very clear fact. Inventors who operate without user needs in mind are inventing in the dark. Now, this is not market research. This is not putting surveys into the world and asking people what they want. And you know why? And some of my Hope design thinking students will recognize this very smart man, Jose Colucci from IDEO here in the Boston office. And what Jose says is absolutely true. People, our prospective customers, they don't do what they say they do. They don't do what we think they do, and they don't even do what they think they do, okay? And it's not because they're dishonest. It's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're drunk or stoned, okay? It's because we have certain ways of interacting in the world, and we don't necessarily always get in deep touch with what those are. So to be able to know what people do, it's not about asking them per se. Is that a part of it? Sure. But much more important is watching them, to take on an anthropological approach and to be like Margaret Mead, go out into the wild and see them in their natural environment. And I love the translation of this Japanese phrase, Genki Genbetsu, okay? You cannot be sure of anything unless you go and see it for yourself. So if you are running a startup and you believe that you can somehow delegate customer voice, customer discovery, understanding the behavior of customers to someone other than yourself, you should go do something else. If you have not chosen a business that you are passionate enough about, that you are not curious, and you don't want to go out and do this yourself, you have picked the wrong market. You should be doing something else, okay? So, Intuit. Many of you know Intuit. Intuit is the creator of a couple of well-known brands, QuickBooks and TurboTax. QuickBooks is an $8 billion company that is as flat as any business you'll ever find. It is a company comprised of what they call two pizza teams. They run the entire company on two operating systems, Design for Delight. Design for Delight is essentially human-centered design and lean startup, okay? And I love what Brad Smith has to say. When you're out in the market, you're always looking for the non-obvious, right? What is surprising? What is different from what is expected, that you had expected? This is where true innovation and learning start, okay? So this is, at a very high level, the human-centered design methodology. You can say that it's also the IDEO methodology. You saw Jose's face a little while ago. It all begins with empathy. We all remember Bill Clinton as he was president. I feel your pain, right? You've got to be able to feel your customer's pain. There's some awesome video of Hannah and Aaron, the two co-founders of Sproutel, going out and visiting young children at homes with their parents, dressed in bear costumes. Now, why would two incredibly bright, well-educated Northwestern engineering graduates go out and be willing to be looked at maybe as silly when they go out and talk to children? They do that because they know that children will not be threatened by what are ostensibly cartoon characters, okay? And their customer is a child with type 1 diabetes. There is no more empathy. I don't think there's a more symbolic representation of empathy than to have these two young men and women, incredibly competent people, dressed like bears, get out of their car and sit down on the ground, looking right into the eyes of a child, bringing themselves to their level. That is the essence of empathy, okay? So we want to go out and we want to really generally understand the pains, the concerns, the challenges, the issues, the frustrations, right, of what our target customer most cares about. And then we're going to come back as part of, ideally, a very cross-disciplinary team. And we're going to come back and we're going to begin to define what we believe will be the ideal solution that will make that individual's life or that group's life easier, okay? And we're going to spend a lot of time ideating around that idea, right? And again, we could have a 12-hour workshop tonight on ideation. We can't go there, but very few teams ideate in a way that allows true creativity to flourish. And a lot of it really revolves around just any idea is a good idea. It is amazing what happens when you see cross-pollination of different ideas. Sometimes the craziest idea in the room can be shaped into something that is profoundly transformative. And of course, tonight, we're going to focus mostly on prototyping, right? Prototyping is thinking with your hands. When my friends from Intuit started thinking about putting in place a human-centered design operating system in the company, they said for the first 2 years, and my students remember this very well, I'm sure, for the first 2 years, they talked about it, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. It was status quo. So we're going to present a PowerPoint slide on why human-centered design is good. The minute they said, we're done with the slides, we're just going to start prototyping, was the minute that transformation actually happened at Intuit, okay? This is an 8,000 person company. Transformation doesn't happen easily, but that was a very transformative moment. Of course, everything we do, we test and measure, okay? So, a good Italian guy by the name of Da Vinci said this very well: simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Now luxury handbag makers have co-opted this phrase, okay? More recently, a gentleman from Providence, Rhode Island, who was until recently the president of the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the prominent design schools, John Maeda, paraphrased it. Simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful, okay? Now, our friends at Disney, a remarkably sophisticated company that have been profitable generation after generation. This is a world-class company. I feature Disney in my Disruptive Business Model Innovation class, my Design Thinking class, and in my Lean Startup class, because in all instances they're world-class. They have created something called the Magic Band, because we all know what it's like to wait in a line at Disney World, especially if you have children, in the summer, and you're waiting for an hour and a half. So they've gone and they've created a linkage to the digital world, which allows for a completely different experience, okay? So the ability to understand what someone's experience is really what human-centered design is all about. Disney does a brilliant job. It was all about simplification with the Magic Band, okay? So today it turns out that John Maeda, the great human-centered designer, is no longer the president of the Rhode Island School of Design. He is now a full partner at Kleiner Perkins, the world's preeminent venture capital firm. Now, Kleiner Perkins, of course, was in the news recently for reasons that it would prefer to have not been in the news. Okay, and I'm sure many of you are smiling and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I love this quote from Maeda. What is next for technology and design? A lot less thinking about technology for technology's sake, and a lot more thinking about design. Art humanizes technology and it makes it understandable. Design is needed to make sense of information overload. Anybody in this room feel like you might have a little bit of a case of information overload? Maybe just a small amount of it, right? Design is needed to make sense of information overload. It is why art and design will rise in importance during the century as we try to make sense of all the possibilities that the digital technology world now affords. Now, it turns out one of my design hackers in our Startup Next program is a young woman with the awesome name of Kayla Mathias. Kayla went to Yale and she got a dual degree in mechanical engineering and art. I think that is fucking awesome, okay? The ability to think about the world from the practical aspect of being a mechanical designer and at the same time to approach the world from the creative sense of an artist, okay? So this is, I think, very indicative of where the future is going. And there was a guy that went, and by the way, how many of you have ever been to a TED or a TEDx event? Okay? Clearly these are very inspirational. My friend Arnaldo in the back of the room is helping to organize the TEDx Somerville event that is coming up in just less than a month and a couple of weeks, right?
May 17th.
Yeah, and you guys know what TED stands for. So TED is about 28 years old right now. And TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And 27 years ago, people thought it was profound that there was a convergence between those three unique industries, those three unique disciplines. No one feels that it's all that surprising today. One guy, of course, unfortunately no longer with us, was so far ahead of the curve that it's almost beyond imagination. Steve Jobs spent a lot of time understanding the importance of the intersection of art and technology the moment that he started Apple. Okay, and we all know the Apple Macintosh and the Apple Lisa, and we know the history of Steve Jobs, that he went to Reed College and he studied a whole range of different subjects that were not part of any specific degree program or discipline. He got to explore what he was passionate about. And one of the things he was passionate about was calligraphy. Another thing he was passionate about was typefaces. Okay? Seemingly pretty obscure, pretty esoteric stuff. But it was his passion for the elegance and the simplicity of calligraphy and typefacing that allowed him to think about technology in a way that none of us at that time could have imagined. And there's a great video of Steve Jobs where he's being interviewed and he's being asked to recount the experiences that he had when he went into the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center back in the 1970s. And he saw the very rudimentary elements of the graphical user interface at that time. Now you have to realize, because I'm the oldest guy in the room by a wide amount, okay, that the way that we interacted, if I can even use the word, with computers in that era, is we punched cards. We took these thick cards. It looks like the kind of paper stock that if you don't have an Easy Pass and you actually get a toll, and someone hands you a card, we would punch those. And we would hand them off to a computer operator. And a computer would be in a guarded, raised floor room. And you would hand off this program, which is essentially a stack of cards. And sometime in the middle of the night, the operator would drop that stack into the card reader, and it would run your program. That was interactivity. And in that era, Steve Jobs said, "Holy God, I have seen the future." And the future is a graphical user interface where any one of us can operate our own computer. That was an audacious thing in the 1970s. Insane. But he saw it in about 5 minutes, okay? And so let's talk about a very interesting example. Right here, in this very city, and my friend Mr. Wright is a graduate of Northeastern University. Another much more famous alumni, Ryan will be equally famous, but a very famous alumni is a guy by the name of Sean Fanning. Now, Sean Fanning was an anarchist of the highest form, okay? Because Sean Fanning created a company called Napster, okay? The music industry rues the day that Napster was created. Napster was the beginning of the end of the old music industry. And so a lot of quote-unquote device companies decided we're going to capitalize on all of these free MP3 files. So we're going to create all these devices that play MP3 files. How many of them were successful? Precisely 0. Okay? And then a completely different approach came into play. The human-centric design approach. The approach that was exactly the approach that Steve Jobs and his right hand, Sir Johnny Ive, the world's greatest industrial designer, decided that they would employ. To understand with empathy, we want to consume music. We don't want to consume music to be frustrated. We want to consume music to be inspired. We want to consume music to experience joy. But there was no joy downloading an MP3 file onto a Diamond Rio device because you couldn't parse that set of MP3 files into a playlist. You couldn't search by genre. You couldn't search by album. You couldn't search by artist. And you couldn't fast forward. So you were stuck with this massive flat file, and it was more trouble than it was worth. And what Jobs and Ive understood is, what is the experience that people want to have when they listen to music? And how do we deliver it to them in a digital format? Okay? And so that was the notion that created what we all know today. Okay? The notion of the iPod, the notion of iTunes, the notion that it should be as easy to download a piece of music and to search for it and to tee it up and to combine it with other forms, other artists, and to create playlists, right? And so that's what iTunes was about. So Jobs understood that you needed to create an entire experience in order to be able to transform the digital music industry. And so he understood human-centric design, the golden circle. He understood business model viability, right? This is just a very simple mock-up of the iTunes business model canvas. And one of the critical things that he understood that he needed to do, of course, was to convince these key partners, these record companies, that they needed to parse their album. No longer would people be required to buy 14 songs because only one of them was okay and the other 13 sucked. And Jobs was the only guy that could actually go in and say, here's the deal. You can continue to get 0 for your album, and people will download all 14 songs for free from Napster. Or you can move into a different realm, and that realm is people will buy the songs that they like. So you can get 99 cents for an album, or you can get 0. What will it be? Relatively easy choice, okay? And this was the beginning of the new Apple. The Apple that today has the highest market cap of any company on the planet, and that is redefining what we call the digital lifestyle, okay? And obviously that legacy continues long after Mr. Jobs has passed. We're all designers today. How many of you have designed a pair of sneakers on Nike ID, for example, okay? There's an increasing number of opportunities to design your own products, whether it be jewelry or clothing or footwear or handbags, okay? So we all want to be engaged in designing things that speak to us, okay? So today, all of a sudden, it turns out that human-centered design is hot. What took so long, I don't know. But whether it be Fast Company or Wired or Business Week or whatever publication there is, we have a celebration at least once a year of the great designers and the great designed products of our time. Okay? So now let's get into the subject of prototyping. Okay? Just as we talked about with Intuit, the minute they stopped talking and the minute they started prototyping, they transformed their culture. Walt Disney, the great Walt Disney, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. Less talking, more prototyping. Another great colloquialism is to show, don't tell. That's what our entrepreneurs are going to do in a few minutes. Okay? The next time you are caught in a room full of smart people doing something dumb, like trying to guess or speculate what your users will do, tune them out, flip open your laptop, or alternatively, take out your portable MakerBot 3D printer and start prototyping. Okay? So in the INEO methodology, rapid and iterative prototyping, a very low-def prototype, okay? Nothing more than basically a sketch, okay? And in the language of lean startup, you can equate very quickly a rapid prototype to a minimum viable product as a very low-def minimum viable product, okay? So don't make people think about your idea, help them to experience your idea, okay? There's a very famous case where IDEO helped a surgical instrumentation company create a prototype, and the IDEO partners in the room literally pulled together an Expo dry erase pen and a clothespin and some tape to show what they were intending for an eye, nose, throat doctor device, okay, which eventually became this. Okay? Lean startup is all around idea, put it out into the hands of someone, measure it, and learn very rapid iterations. Okay? So here's my minimum viable product, and over the evolution, here is my quote-unquote first customer ship product, right? The MVP can be extremely low-def, but it has to be able to convey your idea in a way that is meaningful. So I took a course in design thinking at Stanford, and one of the classic ways to learn how to do design thinking is to use the same kind of arts and crafts stuff that we used at summer camp, okay? That was the way that a lot of people learned how to prototype. Now, another way you can prototype is using Legos. And I've increasingly started to use Legos as a way to help people think through their business models. And I will tell you, it is an extraordinary thing to see people prototype business models with Legos. And we can talk about that in the Q&A afterwards, okay? Dave Bisceglia, who is the CEO of TapLab, and a young, very capable entrepreneur, who was named by Forbes as one of 30 Americans under the age of 30 having a profound influence in tech this year, and is a mentor at our startup labs, Startup Next, right, is living, walking the talk, and he's going and meeting with some of our students, including my TA, Lita Maria from Germany, and taking them through the next generation of a game that he created. Okay? In this design thinking class, we taught MBAs and MIBs, like my friend Arnaldo in the back of the room, how to create digital prototypes. One of the students in the classroom was an Egyptian MD by the name of Omar Shaker, who took that digital prototype and came in second place in the state of California healthcare IT competition. And when people asked Omar, what is it like? He said, for the first time, I can actually be an active participant in hackathons and be a leader because now I can prototype. I'm the equivalent of a coder, okay? And when you start to teach your students about 3D printing, and they start to see all of the massive use cases, all of the massive opportunities, they start to realize how transformative 3D printing is. And so now I want to introduce the first of our three young entrepreneurs. I want to introduce Joel Schwartz from Sproutel. And this is a picture of Hannah Chung in our design thinking class on the Hull campus in Boston just about 8-9 months ago. And Hannah is holding a version of Jerry the Bear, aka the Diabetes Bear on Twitter. The Diabetes Bear today is in roughly 5% of all American households that have children that have type 1 diabetes, and they are now off on their journey to take this platform to address another critical need for children, which is those who suffer from food allergies. So I want to welcome my friend, Joel Schwartz. Welcome. Just a soft ejector button, okay? Cool. Put that out for you. All yours, Mike.
Hey everybody, thank you Mike for the introduction and MakerBot for hosting us tonight. So as Mike said, we gave a very detailed introduction on who I am, so I'll skip to what we do. So at Sproutel, Jerry the Bear represents our first product in making comforting companions for children with chronic illnesses. And so our mission is to build more of these products for all chronic illnesses that kids have and expanding into health and wellness. Jerry the Bear started, as Mike said, as a student project when Hannah and Aaron, our co-founders, started with a really open-ended question, which is how can we help improve the lives of children and their families who have type 1 diabetes? And so starting with this question and no product in mind, they went out on a journey to learn about what it's like for families, what they need to learn from the time of diagnosis and the types of, and what the children have to learn. And we focused specifically on young kids, which doesn't represent the highest number of kids with type 1 diabetes, but the highest rate at which new kids are diagnosed. So we're focusing on kids between the ages of 3 and 9 and learning about the kind of fear that they go through and the stress that families have. And the key insight that came from this process of human-centered design focusing on the families and on the children is what created our company, because they landed on this insight that children, all children, deal with their emotions and deal with what they need to learn through play. So kids were taking their stuffed animals and their teddy bears and pretending that their animals had diabetes and that they needed to be cared for, that they needed to have injections of insulin. And this led to this idea of how can we take this insight, this idea that kids are enacting this natural play mechanism to learn about this stuff and inject just a little bit more into it, bring this alive and inject more education into it and use it to really become an emotional coping tool. So this is the first drawing that Hannah and Aaron made of Jerry the Bear with the rest of their team, because it was a bigger team at the time when they were students. And it launched into this idea of, okay, well, let's take a teddy bear and through adding some simple electronics, give this bear simulated diabetes, give it a blood sugar level that kids have to respond to. This is the first bear that was made. This is actually a hard model foam with fur stuffed over it, kind of this idea of when Hannah and Aaron first started, there was a lot that they didn't know about prototyping. This wasn't the key focus. They weren't even finished with school yet. So they took the idea of just getting started, just start building, and really just made what they could at the time to just start exploring this idea of what they had. So this is, despite this cute girl hugging it, this bear I think is incredibly creepy. It's got eyes cut out of a Furby and some other stuff. And then it moved on into the next iteration. So as they kept going forward, the product kept getting a little bit better. And this is where we used really simple electronics, open source hardware, Arduino, 3D printing to go from bear to bear and start and iterating on it by testing it with families and saying, what do you like about this? Does this need to change? What about, and then interviewing with kids. And so we went through this process until we got to a point where it seemed like we were on the right track. And I was okay, this is what parents want to hear, this is what kids like, let's now, we think we're getting close to what product we want to make, let's make a bunch of them and then test it and really try to prove out our hypothesis. So again, back to the 3D printer, making molds of the casings that would hold the electronics, this simple monochrome screen, which is both what would display the blood sugar and then what you could hit the up and down arrows to dial the dose of insulin. He's got a little light sensor in his mouth where we can read different food cards that have different carb values. So we made about 30 of these and went out and tested them with 30 different families, which is where Hannah donned a bear suit to start meeting with kids, because they first started without bear suits. And kids would not really want to talk to them. They talked to them as if they were adults. But then as it kind of became more of the character that Jerry is, kids it's amazing how quickly they dropped inhibition to speak openly and honestly about what they cared about. So this is Hannah testing this prototype, doing workshops with kids. I wish this photo also had Aaron in it so you could see them both. But testing it with families, testing it with kids, and we took these 30 things, gave them to families and said treat them like customers. Take this home for a week. with a camera and a notepad and document what you like about it or what you don't like about it. And we realized, and then we saw our customers and our mock customers kind of fall into two categories. There were the families that loved the bear, like the kids engaged with it all week long, and there were the kids who liked it initially, but they kind of dropped off after a day or two. And so that coincided really directly with how long the kids had been, how long since they've been diagnosed with diabetes. So the kids who just were diagnosed had more to learn. They had more reason to engage with Jerry and like the simple function that he offered. The kids who'd been diagnosed over a year ago, much longer, had less. So once the novelty wore off, they had no reason to keep playing with Jerry. And now we've said, like, well, we don't want to make diabetes is a small market already. We don't want to make a product that only appeals to kids who get diagnosed at 1 year. That's not really, engagement is like the crux of what makes our product useful. The longer that kids can engage with it, the more learning opportunity, the more like emotional bond they'll form, and the more comfort they can get. So we realized that Jerry needed a story. Jerry needed a story to like give reason to why kids should care. And so we came up with this idea that Jerry's going to go on an adventure. He's going to train for his Bear Olympics, like the All-Star Games. He's going to learn how to do the high dive, how to climb trees with a monkey, ski with a penguin. And while he's doing these things, he's going to come into different learning opportunities because Jerry has diabetes, and he'll learn about when he needs to check his blood sugar and what he needs to do if he's feeling low or high, and symptom recognition. So this represented a pretty radical change where we thought we already knew what we were building. And we realized we needed to figure out a way to put these stories into the bear. And so that represented switching to what our product currently looks like, which is putting a touch screen in his belly, giving him an accessories of food cards and insulin pen that we already had, but now the touch screen is a way to deliver this content, deliver the animated story through what we call developing two modes of play. We have free play, kids can pretend like with the magic of like more simulated diabetes, or guided play, which is following along with Jerry on these storybooks to learn more about his adventure. And again, like 3D printing was super helpful for us in figuring out how we want to capture these electronics, put them in the bear, work through the kinks in manufacturing before we actually had to tool our molds and like go through that process. So fast forward through all the manufacturing process, and it's Christmas 2013. We pre-sold about 200 bears and got these out to families. And so this is where our design process shifted again. Our hardware was frozen. It's expensive to make, so we weren't about to retool. Our bears were like, this is this design we still sell, but now we had a chance to fix the software. We had a chance to write more stories and kind of respond to what families and children had to say about like what was intuitive or what was not. Diabetes is complicated enough. We wanted to make a product as easy to use as possible. And so we spent the past year and a half refining the software over a few iterations. We shipped the last big change in the fall, and then this past Christmas, we were able to double our reach, and now it gets about 4% of kids who are newly diagnosed each year. And it's felt pretty great. So now what? We're focusing now on the next product, the next group of kids. And so we went back to figuring out, we looked at asthma and food allergies and different markets, different chronic illnesses, and we tried to decide which one to pick. And as we interviewed with families and started to meet more people, we found that kids with food allergies, same key insight from diabetes, these children are pretending that their teddy bears and their stuffed animals also go into anaphylaxis, also have allergic reactions to food. So we started to go down this process of, okay, like we've learned a lot through Jerry already. We've learned the stories help, that the care aspect helps, that we can use this same kind of format to introduce educational lessons. But one really big problem that we had that we kind of like skipped over a little bit because in the interest of just moving quickly is that Jerry's really expensive. We sell Jerry for about $300 to families because we make it in pretty small batches, and the margins, that's what we need to like sustain the business. And we looked at the cost of goods and the bill of materials, and the most expensive thing is the tablet that we build into its belly. This is a custom Android tablet that we affectionately call probably the most like artisanally crafted Android tablets that you can buy, because we're like hand assembling these things in Rhode Island after we get the electronics in, and this like kind of bespoke supply chain we had to build because of our niche market. So we realized the only thing we can do, we don't want to be in the race to the bottom of making the cheapest tablet and then stuffing it into a robot. So we thought, why don't we use the tablets that 50% of families in the US already own? But when we take the tablet out of the bear, we're taking what is like a huge attention sink. If you give this, we've learned that like the same thing that we used to drive engagement with our bear is now we're removing from it. So we have this new problem that we're working through currently, which is how can we use all the storybooks on the tablet that are engaging, that give backstory to Jerry, while still making the bear meaningful and still making it something that kids can emotionally bond with. So this was one of the first iterations that we just created, which is this idea of like, let's make a custom display that has 6 segments. This can be like the colors can glow and respond to different moods and health states that Jerry's in. We can turn each segment on and off like individually, so we can give Jerry a heart, or the heart can rotate, or if he goes in anaphylaxis, we can give a shock. Good responses from our younger kids, but then the older kids, it's tough. So we want to really extend the age, have Jerry be applicable to all the way from 3 to 9, which from a childhood development standpoint is a pretty big age range. So this is one iteration. We're going through a few more. But just to talk about how 3D printing's been useful in this process, to go from shapes that we kind of designed through in clay, it's to develop the segments was really helpful. Like the only way we could do it for low cost and quickly was 3D printing. But what we do to kind of accelerate that and then iterate on top of it more is we do silicon casting. We pour urethane in these things. YouTube is an incredible educator for anyone who doesn't know how to do this. You can buy this stuff at an art store and like make kind of casts of anything on your desk within a few hours. So we make a lot of urethane castings. We grind them down with Dremel tools, sand them different things, fill them up with LEDs, and we brought to life. We put it into the bear and brought to life this display that we're working on. So we're still working through new ones, like thinking about how we can use voice more, but just wanted to give a preview of what the first prototype looks like. I guess this is our team. We're 4 people working out of Providence.
Talk about 3D printing, because I know that you had a couple of parts, components printed. Talk a little bit about how 3D printing supports your rapid prototyping process.
Sure. So when we start with anything that's made out of plastic, it's mostly stuff with plastic on Jerry. When we work with the fabric, we prototype in a little bit of a different way because it's plush and soft. But anything that's plastic, which is his food cards, his pen, the casing for his electronics, the new casing that's going to go in the belly of the new bear, we start, our process is to start with sketching, walk through different ideas, see what we like or don't like. Then bring that into 3D with clay because it's easy to mold through stuff. Look kind of like even all of us, we're not all CAD engineers, but we can all like mold with clay. So then we use that to hone down what kind of like physically what looks good, and then start to develop it in CAD and then put it to 3D printing so we can have 2 big benefits. One is that it lets us like fine tune at a little bit of a more deliberate scale than, because we're not the best clay sculptors. And the second one is repeatability. So when we want to make not just 1 or 2 of these bespoke prototypes to bring with the family to have break and then go back and try to fix it to get it to the next family, 3D printing is a much more robust way to print out 2s and half dozens or dozens of these things so that we can bring them to test with the multiples of families that we need in order to get meaningful feedback.
That's great. So I think what we'll do is just to keep things moving, we're going to open up for Q&A at the end. So very nice. Thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate it. So as Ryan comes up, Ryan Wright, founder, CEO, co-founder, CEO of RightGrid, it's amazing to see the renaissance of hardware companies, right? A few years ago, it would be almost impossible to find a hardware startup in Boston because hardware startups had required a tremendous amount of capital. But today we've got so many different options. 3D printing, of course, is transformative technology that allows for manufacturing to happen much more easily. Crowdfunding has become a huge source of capital for hardware companies. Which one do you need, bud? Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that. No worries. You got your stuff? You good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ryan, again, how long has RightGrid been up and running at this point?
I've been at it 2.5 years. We were incorporated in March of 2013, so just over 2 years now.
Okay. Officially. So I guess as you bring up your deck, if you just maybe talk about what it was that you saw in the market that led you to create this opportunity. There's this really great modified version of Maslow's hierarchy. How many of you know Maslow's hierarchy, right? Maslow's hierarchy is about what it takes to survive in this world, and it starts at the very basic level of security, and then food, right? And eventually maybe self-actualization. Well, the new version, it's been updated for the digital era. And the new version of Maslow's hierarchy is even before you worry about your personal safety, you care about having your battery charged, you care about Wi-Fi, okay? So the digital era of Maslow's hierarchy is exactly what Ryan is targeting. So go for it.
Yeah, and Mike had a good intro already, so I'll just jump into it as well. So for us, this started with the idea that our cell phones are everywhere, they're ubiquitous, we use them to do everything, and yet there just aren't convenient, free charging solutions available to us while we're on the go. So that's kind of where this started. The idea came out of a class that I was involved with at Babson while I was doing an evening MBA. We did an initial kind of feasibility analysis around an outdoor charging platform, and that slowly morphed into Right Grid. So this was our first design. I did this in class one day while the teacher was talking, just with with parts in PowerPoint, and this is where it started in August of 2012. So we used whatever tools we had available to us. I was a team of one at the time. Hadn't been formed as a company, but we had this idea, and we had done some feasibility analysis with end users just to say, what are the most common problems that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And time again, number one, number two was always geared around the cell phone, and my cell phone's always dying. So that steered us this way. Then with parts from Home Depot, Radio Shack, and the Dummy's Guide to Electrical Engineering, I built this station. Built it in my living room. My girlfriend was ready to kick me out of the apartment because we were in a 700 square foot apartment at the time. I was getting sawdust and copper wire in the carpet. It was a mess. But built it kind of as a test to myself to say, is this even possible? And with a couple months of work and nights and weekends, I was able to put this thing together, just off the shelf pieces. And we had a deep cycle battery and a solar panel. It worked okay. We could charge a couple of phones, but this was kind of our minimum viable product that I then pitched to some early stage investors and serial entrepreneurs, and they tore it apart. They said it's ugly, the user interface is terrible, people awkwardly kind of stand around this pole and face each other, and you're shoulder to shoulder with a stranger, and it was terrible. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and I went on Odesk. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Odesk, but I found a designer that was based overseas that basically she didn't have a profile yet on Odesk, no one had recommended her, so she said, I'll work with you basically for free, just because I need to get my name out there if you promise to write me a really good recommendation. So we went through this design process with her, taking my first design, we went to a design that we wanted to make it look like almost like a palm tree, and then that was way too expensive, so then we decided to go with something that provided seating for the end user with lock boxes, because that was feedback that we got from end users was, while we're out and we're about, we don't want to be tethered to the device. Everything's wireless today. And we want to have some way to just lock it up, charge it up, and not have to worry about it rather than being tethered to this stupid cord while I'm waiting because I'm fearful that someone's going to rip my phone off while I'm gone. So we got down this design path, pitched that design to some folks, and we got some really good feedback on the design. So that's when I started going out and talking to contract manufacturers. And I said, how much is it going to cost for us to build this thing? And the best quotes I got back just for tooling were $250,000. So to injection mold this thing and all that kind of custom stuff was just to get fit up $250,000. So I said, all right, we got to scrap this whole design path, and we got to go in another direction. And
you want to give a shout out to your designer or not?
So Teskin, well, this wasn't Sam.
Okay, this was
not Sam. Yeah, so
okay.
it was a woman named Teskin, Teksin. I always mess up the pronunciation.
And where's she from?
She was overseas. She's since moved to the U.S.
Okay.
She's in Connecticut now.
Cool.
And so she was very helpful, but we had to kind of abandon this design path. And kind of the learning there was I worked with a really awesome industrial designer, but an industrial designer that had zero experience bringing product to market. Yeah. And so this whole path would have been avoided if I had somebody up front telling me, you can do this, but that material, just to injection mold that material, any experienced designer is going to know that you can't build that at an affordable price unless you're building in scale and we're a bootstrap startup. So going back to the design phase, I did another one of these PowerPoint things, and this we call our refrigerator unit, and we thought maybe we'll get AT&T to sponsor these things, and we'll do the lockers, and we built one. And so again, at this time I hired on an electrical engineer, he did a lot with the internal electronics of the station to further that along and match charge profiles and charge as fast as possible. But the aesthetics of the station were definitely still lacking. And the reason for this, we actually had this event that a festival said, you can place your station for free, we'll let you do it, and you can just get some feedback. So we're like, great. The night before, we were supposed to get our prototype parts back from a local contract manufacturer, and they called us at 7 o'clock that night and said, your parts are locked in the spray booth at our contract, or our paint booth manufacturing partner, and we can't get them out, so sorry, we don't have anything for you. So we had to go to Home Depot that night and get plywood and make a big box and throw the lockers into a big box and mount the solar panel on top. We were up till like 2 in the morning that night before, and then we loaded into a truck at 5 a.m. and drove off to the festival. But we got it out there, we got really good feedback, lines of people. This was the first time that we launched the station with the lock boxes, and the big feedback that we got early on was from investors was no one will ever part with their phone. They'll never just give you your phone and walk away.
And they were wrong.
And they were wrong. I had people throwing their phone at me, just saying, "Oh, I'll be back in an hour. Lock it up for me." I said, "No, you got to set the locker. There's some stuff you have to do." But we found that the lockers work. They said this thing is ugly, but it's functional. So we knew the lockers had to stay. We knew we had to work on the aesthetic design of the station. It also weighed about 500 pounds. We had to lift it in and out of the back of a U-Haul.
No wonder why you work out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I got
and
it.
with the solar panel was fixed, so as the sun moved across the sky,
Part of his job.
every hour or so I was lifting it up, shifting it around. So that was kind of brutal.
Got to build a sundial.
Right. And so in terms of kind of, we talk about cheap ways to prototype, we did some mock-ups with just trash we had in our incubator space. So we found some foam, we found some cardboard and duct tape, and we just taped things together to kind of come up with some different designs. We were, with this design segment, we were going for this one, and this one, kind of a pedestal type deal that would minimize the materials to actually build the unit. And then we did one that was more traditional box. And this helped us, but at the end of the day, we found that, again, going down this design path, we came out with, again, similar to the other story, where kind of start with drawing, move that into more of a CAD, and then go to pricing from there. And again, we found that we could do this, but it was going to be kind of expensive, and again, bootstrap startup. So we again went back to the drawing board, and that's where we found off-the-shelf parts that we could get this locker bay and the lockers themselves for about $1,000 pre-made for us.
Wow.
So a company in California would ship them to us. In about 2 weeks we'd have the unit. So we started with that. Then we found that through getting it out in front of people, they said, well, if you've got this solar panel, one of the things we didn't realize about advertising at the time was the higher your advertisement is at an outdoor location, the more you can charge for it. So we had this pole, we elevated the pole, and we mocked it up with a box and started looking at where we could put advertising. And that became from a model based on monetizing through the end user. That's when we made the pivot to monetizing through station sponsors who would pay us to sponsor the stations, put them out in high traffic, high visibility areas. And it all came about as part of the kind of design process and continually placing prototypes out there for people to give us feedback on, because we weren't going down that path whatsoever.
Cool.
And then that eventually got to this. So this was our third generation unit, our first production model. We built 6 of these at a contract manufacturer, deployed them last year at a host of music festivals, fairs, outdoor events, conferences. Did pretty good in terms of generating revenue off of the units, but found that at the end of the day, the logistics of managing the stations, deploying them over and over again, setting them up, breaking them down, shipping them to and from, cleaning them, swapping in and out advertising, there wasn't much of a profit left at the end of the day. So again, we had a pivot where we shifted to more of a sales model. So from a rental to a sales model for more permanent installations. And this unit was really made for ease of assembly, setup, breakdown. And it wasn't meant for being outdoors, kind of permanently.
Sure.
And so we went through a new design process again, kind of our 4th progression, with a bunch of drawing. Drawings got a little bit more complicated and intricate, and that eventually led us to some CAD modeling. This guy here had some interesting geometries, but it was going to be tough to manufacture. This guy was very similar to what we already had, so kind of too plain for us. This guy we called our deodorant stick. It gave us kind of an interesting design in that people could plug in and charge from either side of the unit. And then this one was our arcade style setup, so an old 1980s arcade game. And from that, we kind of combined those last two, and we made a cardboard mock-up, full-size mock-up, made sure we could interface with the station that was ergonomic in design. Went through the CAD modeling of that and got to our fourth prototype design, which is now into production. And this is our second production model. That's Sam, our mechanical engineer, the guy who made all these nice renderings. He's my co-founder. And this is our first pilot unit off the line in our contract manufacturer, Century Tiewood, out in Holliston, Mass. So those are coming available now.
Cool, awesome.
So that's our design progression, kind of starting from November 2012 out through today. And in terms of some other things, in terms of 3D printing, so we actually did use 3D printing in our process for the housing. So this is a USB cable that feeds up into the back of the lockers, and then this is the universal charge adapter that the end user interfaces with. And we made this kind of clamshell that would close over the two, sit in the back of the locker. It was tamper resistant, so we could house that connection and also provide strain relief. And that was parts that we made at the time right in our prototyping space at Greentown Labs, where we operate out of. And at the time, 3D printing, so this was 2 years ago, 3D printing was kind of expensive at that point. Today, I mean, for us to do this, it's very cheap. So it's come a long way in just the short period that we've been.
So is it order of magnitude difference, or how would
you?
Yeah, I mean,
we went to the point where we did a few prototypes this way early on and didn't really look back at it until maybe the last 3 or 4 months. And when we reviewed, it was actually going to be, once you factored in shipping and handling and all of that, about equal to going and having a mold made somewhere.
Wow.
But we could turn around the 3D parts right in our shop. We've got 3 or 4 companies with 3D printers.
Right.
And then kind of what's next for us is we've developed a full PCB design, our printed circuit board. That's Altium, the program that we use there. Worthington Assembly builds these for us. We've actually built 10 of them now, and we're wiring them up and putting them into our stations.
Awesome.
So that's our journey.
That's great. And so again, we're gonna take questions at the end, but just if you talk about sort of what you see as the future of Right Grid. I mean, is it festivals and public places?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us is it's not necessarily just that we are a charging station. This charging station is kind of where we're starting. It's our first product, but we see the long-term vision of where we're going with the company as point-of-use power generation. So the IP that we're developing within this board, specifically the software and the charging algorithms, are what we're going to leverage going forward for some licensing deals with other manufacturers to move things that are traditionally on the grid today off the grid, like vending machines and digital ad displays. But we can also use this package to enable us to provide Wi-Fi hotspot capability at our locations, putting that in. And we've got a few other things that we're looking to do, things like using this as an off-grid security system so that you can power your camera for security purposes. There are a host of different things that we can do from this common platform, and this is at the core of what we do. So that's that distributed off-grid point-of-use power system is at the core of Right Grid.
Awesome. Well done. Thank you. All right. So many of you may or may not know, of course, Israel is called Startup Nation, right? And the country of Israel has produced over 1,000 technology companies that have wound up on the NASDAQ, right, which is the tech stock exchange in the United States. And there's a reason for that, right? The Israeli people are incredibly resilient people. They've all been trained with the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. And it's an operation that's extremely flat in many ways, like a lean startup operation. And their mission very quickly is to figure it out, okay? And so we're lucky to have with us tonight Goet Gonin, is that how I pronounce your last name? Geut Gonin, see that? And she's with Neo Toys, and they're here at the Learn Launch Accelerator in Boston, and they're working on, and what we've seen tonight is sort of that convergence of digital and mechanical, and once again we're going to see the convergence of 3D printed toys with a link to a digital app. So Coyotes, please come on up and tell us about what you guys are up to.
Okay.
And if you want us to get away from the table, do you need this for your show and tell here?
Let's sit here for
Okay.
something that is
Okay, cool.
okay. So my one is going to be a bit different.
Yeah, cool.
And
Mike.
my
Yes.
sorry. So as Mike mentioned, my co-founder and CEO was supposed to be here and had to travel in short notice. So I haven't got a chance to prepare slides, but I'm going to talk about our story, where we started, and how we switched from using 3D printing as a prototyping tool to using it as a manufacturing tool for our toys. So I studied industrial and product design in Israel, and during my studies I designed mainly toys. It's a 4 years studies, and I think I designed something like 12 toys during the time, and it was pretty obvious that I'm going to design another toy for my graduation project. And I studied a bit about the toy industry and what kids are missing these days. And I found out that kids today are lacking problem-solving skills and creativity, since they are using smart devices, tablets, smartphones. They are using them for 8 hours a day in average. This is the average 8 to 12-year-old kid. This is how much they use smart devices. And the result is that they get less excited with physical toys, and they just abandon them after using them for an hour or less. And this is how I started my graduating course. So at first, what I designed was a robot construction kit to teach kids how to code. And I won a few awards for it, and was asked to send it to present in a few design weeks in Europe. Then I started getting these emails asking me, where can I buy these toys? And then Nadav, my co-founder, and I said, okay, we might have something here. So these toys were actually made, do you know mechano or erector sets?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So they were quite similar. I used Arduino to code them. So it wasn't the traditional erector set, but it was made out of aluminum. And I started playing with kids. So through my design process during the school day, I did a few testing with kids, but it wasn't enough. So we started testing again, and we got to the point where we understood that this was just too much for kids today. So we evolved into making, the other side of the table, you can see a robotic toy. It's a modular robotic toy that you can assemble in many different ways, and it has many different sensors and actuators, and its purpose was that kids can actually assemble the toy whatever way they want it, and then code the different sensors and actuators to behave the way they want it to behave, so they can just make up some new games for themselves. And then we started prototyping, and we used these clear plastic balls, if you know them, and we used tons of cardboard and many different prototyping tools. And we got to the point where it took us too long to make one prototype, so we decided to take some of our savings and buy a MakerBot replicator 2 and started using it. And it worked 24/7. And
So reliable is what you mean, it just kept going.
it just kept going. It still keeps going. I just left a printing over at the office right now. So our iterations became, instead of making a prototype in a month, it became making a prototype in a week, even less sometimes. Depends on what we do. And then we got to the point where we tested with many kids and we got a great result with the toys. And we started thinking, okay, so what are we going to do now? Because Israel is known for its software startups and investors, and no one would give money to a hardware startup. So we started to think of ways to take these toys to the market, because we got great feedback and tons of people signed up in our website, asked to buy these toys. So one day we were just sitting in the office and modeling stuff and playing with parts that we had. And then Adam just said, why aren't we using this to manufacture? This is such a great tool. We use it all the time. We do these great prototypes. This can be the actual product. Why not do this? So we started to talk to makers and see if they even want to, buy this kind of product. And then we got to the great understanding that they are missing one great thing that we have to offer, which is products, 3D printed products that can actually do something. So most of the things you can find online today are inanimate objects. Most of the toys that you can find are toys that you can only play in an imagination play. So when kids take, let's say, the Hello Kitty that I saw they have there. So, yeah. So they can take this Hello Kitty and imagine that they took her to, I don't know where in the world, and have an imaginary play. But, so, as I said before, they are not interested in this kind of play. So, okay, not the best way to phrase it. They are interested in this kind of play, but they don't do it enough. And we wanted to engage them more. So, as I said, our toys can connect to an app, and they have electronics inside of them. And this is how we got to where we are today. We are now working on manufacturing. Hopefully, we're going to be in the market in a few months. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about the toys. So they consist of 3 parts. The first part is the Neo Power Box. It's the box that contains all the electronics. This one is actually big because it is prototype, it's not manufactured. But as you can see, we are, even the power box, we are prototyping with MakerBot. This is one part from the inside. Nadav is a mechanical engineer, so he does all the engineering. So we have the Neo Power Box, then we have our design platform. So we kind of switched from the modular robot kit to a more creative platform where we give kids a basic design of a car, an airplane, action figure, tons of designs, and they can configure them, they can customize them. Those who are more experienced with CAD design, they can download a basic file and then just work on it in a CAD program, what CAD program they want to use. Those who are not familiar with CAD design softwares can use our platform and the features that we put there to each toy to configure and to customize their toy to look the way they want them. And the last part of the toy is the app. So it's a game center app where you can choose the game you want to play with your toy, and we have a bi-directional play where one time you can use your toy to control the app. So let's imagine you have a racing. Oh yeah, I broke it before. So let's imagine that you have a racing game on your tablet right now, and you don't want to move it with you don't want to move the car with your finger. You can move it with the actual toy. Or let's say it's an airplane and you have to fly it, so we just use it this way and it flies on the app. The other way around is where this one, when you use some sort of a toy like this, where the app controls the toy itself. So just like any other remote control car, you can use a smartphone to control your toy. We also have some teaser products like these, which are pullback cars. They are just mechanics, but they are cute for the younger kids. And this is what we do. And we also have here our pins and stickers, and also a 20% discount that you can have when we launch.
Cool.
You are welcome to register. And
Cool. All right, thank you, guys. Thank you. So I just want to open it up quickly for Q&A. Any questions that you have for these great young entrepreneurs that they can answer before we wrap up for tonight? What questions you guys have? So I know a lot of you knew of Jerry the Bear, you knew of Sproutel because I've featured this in a couple of my classes. But what feedback would you give Ryan, for example? So here's Ryan, he's trying to solve this problem that we all have, right? I think everybody in the world wishes they had more access to easy charging of their phone. And most of you are in a demographic that goes to music festivals, that spends a lot of time in inner urban areas. What feedback, Ryan, coming out, what feedback would you give this guy regarding what would work for you in terms of a portable cell phone charging tower? Any thoughts on what? Yeah, please.
I don't have any recommendation. I just have questions.
Yeah, please.
Batteries are becoming more efficient and longer lasting. What's the strategy for that?
Yeah, so my background prior to starting this company, I worked for a company called Skyworks, and they do most of the, not most of, but a lot of the internal components for smartphones, tablets, the like $5 in the new iPhones and content.
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot in terms of what was happening in the industry, and there were periods where battery technology would improve a little bit, but the demands that we then put on our phone draw that back down. So we're constantly asking for more and more out of our phones. So
they're selling 128 gigabyte phones today.
Exactly. And now the next thing, we'll have full holographic capability out of the phone. So the power demand that we're placing on the phone, if everything remained constant, absolutely, we'd be terrified. But the demand that we're placing on the phone is continually outpacing the battery development. And so it's a constant cat and mouse game in those two, which is good for us, but bad for everybody who owns a phone because it drains down the battery very quickly.
Right. So any thoughts, any feedback? I mean, please.
I think battery takes most of the place. I'm not sure how much it takes the place for a solar grid. If you want to save some energy, I think you can place the battery underground, inside the earth, wherever you place that. I think that
in the earth?
Yeah, inside the earth.
Yeah, we could potentially do that. The nice thing, so as we went through this, that station is made out of aluminum so that it won't corrode as much over time. But because it's aluminum, it's very light. So the battery also provides stability at the base. So we have a 220 amp hour battery that we place at the bottom of the station. That for stations that aren't permanently affixed provides stability. So in a wind gust, the thing doesn't just topple over. So we've kind of considered that, but for a permanent installation where space is a concern, definitely that would be an option for us to try to bury that. But then you run into the issue of water tables and the leads. You got to make sure you got an enclosure that comes up through the station because the leads can't be crossed with water or the battery shorts out. So there's a little bit that we have to worry about environmental factors with the battery.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I just want to make a short comment. There is a new material called graphene, which is now researched a lot, coming into play soon. And if it comes into play in the battery field and in energy storage, it will make a big revolution. So the batteries will have a much greater capacity, like 1,000 times more capacity.
Okay.
And these issues can change a little bit. So you might want to look into it as a potential source for your energy storage for your device.
Oh yeah, and so we're not necessarily before that gets commercialized, to commercialize that kind of technology in a large manufacturing environment does take time, and so there'll be incremental improvements over time. But the biggest things that we look for short term, less so than the battery, is just charging capability going to wireless charging. So that's an even shorter term concern that we have. So there's magnetic inductance, the pads at Starbucks with their special case, and then magnetic resonance that accompany Witricity, based here in the Boston area.
Right.
Basically a resonating coil that can charge your phone with no contact and no physical contact of the two devices. So that's what we're looking at, to incorporate that into our station first, and then we'll look at, as those battery improvements happen, we'll look to that. But there's also, even if it happens in the developed world, where that may go into the next generation iPhone or S4, S5, S6 from Samsung. The emerging markets lag behind in terms of the phone technologies, and so even if in the emerging world, in the short term, that happens, you've still got, between South America, Africa, and India, you've got 2 billion cell phone users that are using flip phones still.
Yeah,
So,
and are paying 10% of their monthly salary and walking 7 miles to go get them charged, right? So let's shift gears, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So how many of you have a family member that either has type 1 diabetes, severe food allergies, or asthma? Any input, any feedback for Joel and the Sproutel people?
All elderly people in my family have diabetes. It's a heredity that we have. So, and it's very painful to have it, tested all the time and keeping it checked. So I really appreciate this. The entire concept, though it's for kids, I think it will be good for senior people like my grandma.
Yeah.
She would love to have that one.
Okay, and even though it's for children, right? I mean, clearly there's nothing that would prevent it from being shared with other people.
Right.
And it's obviously a matter of focus right now.
Right, so we've decided to focus on young kids, but even now, like trying to age up a little bit with them and go to the 9-year-olds and more. And then as we go further, just how much we can grow.
Yeah.
So teenagers are tough, but I think elderly might be the next thing after.
Yeah,
kids.
exactly,
And
because
go-
they're looking for the same level of companionship and
If I
support
may
as well.
add, on the teenagers,
Yeah.
at the age of 13, this is what the toy industry calls the dark ages. I'm serious. The dark ages, because at the age of 13, kids start losing interest in toys and become more social and more interested in the other gender and stuff like that. So less and less toys are addressed to the teens. So.
There's some interesting learning opportunities between what you guys do, right?
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of in-depth research in terms of how children interact with toys, and you're moving more toward a gamification approach. So it's great to see you guys connect, right? And that's what entrepreneurship is all about. You never know where your next great idea is going to come from. So any last comments? Yeah, please.
So I was just curious about how much you've thought about incorporating testing and medicine dispersal within the toy itself. So testing the blood, or maybe giving out medicines on time and stuff like that.
Yeah, so for diabetes is unique because it's like very much every kid, children will have different correction factors for different carbohydrates, and there are different types of insulin that get prescribed by doctors. But it's unique in the sense that all children who have type 1 diabetes have to go through the same set of medical procedures, and that becomes less the case with other chronic illnesses. It's something that we're still considering, but the initial approach was to just really make it simple so we could do the same lesson plan to everybody, and then also allows us to really take a step back and not be prescriptive, to kind of protect us from doing something wrong. So we make it very simple. We use and also to be understandable by younger kids. But I think as we've also taken the family first approach, but as we look to, if insurers want to take us up and they see this as being valuable, it's certainly something interesting.
So Gayu, I want to ask you, please, one last question. I want to ask Gayu to comment on something. Yeah.
Sure. First of all, I'd say that's a great product. I can see it in classrooms where other kids, as a presentation, can have empathy for what's going on with the conditions in the room. So that's really cool. I came here to find some insight in something that I'm doing. I wanted to ask, how did you find the specific families that you're prototyping on, the people that you're speaking to? Where did you go to find exactly who to kind of gather information?
We started just asking everybody we knew personally, and then somebody knew somebody, and so that kind of just started to grow, this snowball effect. And especially once we found families with children with type 1, it's a very close-knit community. And so that's what really accelerated it. So more people we found who were then aware of other things. But other things might be like Facebook groups, like local meetups. Diabetes and food allergies also have camps and advocacy groups, which can be ways to try to meet people.
Thank you.
Yep.
So what's interesting about the gender balance in this group is it's much more balanced than is typical in any kind of innovation or entrepreneurship event that I have experience going to, right? Now, part of it may be because human-centered design is about empathy. And I don't think it would be an unfair and sexist thing to say women in general can be more empathic than men, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of discussion about diversity and there's not enough female founders. And you, my friend, are a female founder from Israel. So you took courage to come and leave your family and come to the US. Talk about your journey as a female founder. What are the unique challenges of coming from out of the country and trying to get a company launched here, and then also as a woman? And mostly a guy's world, right? Because you're an electrical engineer.
No, I'm an industrial designer.
Oh, you're an industrial designer, okay. So,
And in Israel, I think industrial and product designer, I think it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Women and men.
Mm-hmm.
So this journey is one hell of an experience, I must say.
Yes.
First of all, I don't know if you know, but Israel right now has 65 degrees. And it has been this for most of the winter. They only had like 10 days of rain, and then another 3 days of snow in Jerusalem only. So
the weather has got your attention, huh?
Yeah.
But once we get beyond the crazy Boston weather,
beside that, so it's very different here. The first thing that I noticed was the ecosystem that startup has here. So Israel is known for being the startup nation, but we didn't have this kind of ecosystem and this kind of support that we find here. We keep meeting new people and they are so generous to us and are just willing to connect with us and to connect us to other people that they know. And though Israel is very small and everyone is in the distance of 3 phone calls away from you, it's still much harder that I just couldn't imagine before I got here.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, and about being a female, so I must say, I've heard a lot of stories about female entrepreneurs who had experience of being mistreated and being, I'm missing the word, help me with that.
Discriminated against?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say that I haven't had these kind of experiences.
Yeah.
I had one in Israel when an investor approached us just to ask me out on a date.
Okay.
Which was very funny, but other than that, I didn't have any kind of these experiences, and I hope we won't have any.
Okay.
Also, I must say that LearnLunch has a lot of female entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Jean Hammond, the co-founder and partner, is a very known female investor in the Boston area.
Probably one of the most active anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she won a prize for that.
Yeah.
So
very strong, very, very strong.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of female mentors there. So I must say,
cool.
I think this is not the best case study.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for that. So anyway, I want to thank all of my HALT students and my HALT alum for coming tonight. I want to thank Joel, I want to thank Ryan, I want to thank Ayut, especially for finding out about this new mission sometime late last night, early this morning, and being flexible enough to come and join us. I'd love to get a photo of the 4 of us up front, if someone would be willing to take that photo for us. Okay? Cool.